What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, in this video, I want to talk about an all-female group that were proteges of funk legend Rick James, and that is the Mary Jane Girls. The Mary Jane Girls consisted of Joanne JoJo McDuffie, Cheryl Ann Sherry Bailey, also known as Sherry Wells, Kimberly Maxie Wuletich, Yvette Corvette Marine, and Candace Candy Gant. And they were active between the years of 1979 and 1987. And they were best known for their songs In My House, All Night Long, Candyman, and their cover version of Walk Like a Man. Joanne, or JoJo, was the lead singer, the others filling out the group's style and appearance. On the studio recordings, McDuffie was backed by a session vocalist rather than the other Mary Jane Girls. Initially, McDuffie was meant to be the breakout singer, but due to miscommunications, it was required that they be an all-girl group. That will be explained a little bit later on. Um, Rick James, by the late 1970s, was frequently backed in his studio recordings by vocalist Joanne JoJo McDuffie and the sisters Maxine and Julia Waters. For live performances starting in 1979, James was backed by McDuffie along with Cheryl Bailey, who used the stage name Sherry Wells, Candace Candy Gant, and Kimberly Maxie Wuletich. Casually amongst the musicians, uh, these girls used the moniker Mary Jane Girls, a subgroup of James' backing band, the Stone City Band. The women eventually learned choreographed dance routines and they practiced under a vocal coach, excuse me. Of course, Mary Jane is a term used to describe marijuana, which is something that Rick James used recreationally as well as other uh, hardcore drugs, unfortunately. In 1983, Rick James proposed to Motown that McDuffie be offered a solo career, but due to miscommunication, the label signed an all-female group, which he determined would be the Mary Jane Girls. James filled the positions behind McDuffie with Wells, Gant, and Wuletich. He also wrote all the original songs and produced all the recordings. The Waters sisters and McDuffie sang all the parts on the first Mary Jane Girls album, Mary Jane Girls, which was released in 1983. The album yielded their first R&B hits, Candyman, All Night Long, which was later included in the soundtrack of the 2002 video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and Boys. In live performances, the Mary Jane Girls were backed by the Stone City Band. The male band members also sang the background vocals to support McDuffie as lead vocalist. Sherry Wells left the group before the next album project was recorded. She was replaced by Yvette Corvette Marine. The group's image was styled as containing a streetwise girl, McDuffie, a supermodel, Gant, a cheerleader Valley girl, initially Wells, and after she left, Marine, and a dominatrix, Wuletich. The group released their second album, Only For You, in 1985. McDuffie was featured on most of the songs, and the Waters sisters were hired to provide background vocals, since the other members were vocally limited. The lead single, In My House, became the group's biggest hit, reaching number 3 on the R&B chart and then crossing over to the Billboard Hot 100 chart, where it reached number 7 and spent 12 weeks in the top 40. It also charted on the Hot Dance Club Play chart, peaking at number 1 for 2 weeks in April of '85. Wild and Crazy Love was the second single from this album and also fared well on the R&B top 10 and dance charts. The last single, Break It Up, only reached number 79 on the R&B chart and did not chart on the Billboard Hot 100, but it did hit number 39 on the Hot Dance Club Play chart. A third album was recorded by the group, the project called Conversation, but it was shelved for decades. Finally released in 2014 as part of a larger retrospective of James' work. However, a single was released from the project in 1986, a cover of the Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons hit Walk Like a Man, which was heard in the film A Fine Mess. This single charted at number 41 on the Billboard Hot 100. Another single, Shadow Lover, was also released in 1986, and the Mary Jane Girls appeared on Soul Train to lip sync to it, but the single was not promoted by the label. By that time, Gant had obtained other work when James and Motown were in dispute, since the Mary Jane Girls had no label support. The next year, in 1987, they officially disbanded. Sherry Wells was recruited away from the Mary Jane Girls by Morris Day to be the lead singer for his all-female band, the Daisies, which released one album and one single on Reprise in 1990. These releases did not chart. The next year in 91, Maureen sued Virgin Records, claiming that she had shared the lead vocals on the songs Opposites Attract, Knocked Out, and I Need You on Paula Abdul's debut album, Forever Your Girl. 2 years later, a jury ruled against Maureen. In 1995, the song All Night Long was remixed by Mike Gray and Joan Pern, titled The Hustlers Convention Remixes. Also that same year, McDuffie, Gant, and Wuletich performed on television on The Jenny Jones Show, billing themselves as MJG. In 1997, McDuffie recorded with James on his 1997 Urban Rhapsody album on the Torch song Never Say You Love Me. In 2001, Mary J. Blige reported that she had purchased the rights to the name Mary Jane Girls for the purpose of putting together a girl group composed of one Asian American, one African American, one Latino, and one white singer. Blige said she wanted the name because her own name was Mary Jane Blige. Blige did not pursue the project. In 2003, the Mary Jane Girls were featured on VH1 in a Where Are They Now episode. The next year, the girls, of course, mourned the passing of Rick James in August of 2004. And, you know, I still remember when he passed away because it was shortly after he appeared on the BET award show, which was in late July. He was riding high at that time because, that's when he was, not too long before that he had been featured on the Chappelle Show. Rick James bitch was a catchphrase that was just everywhere at that time. And, it was just sad, that shortly thereafter he passed away. He was 56 years old. In 2009, McDuffie's husband, Robert Funderburg, applied for control of the trademark Mary Jane Girls, but the application was abandoned in 2010. And in 2019, the Mary Jane Girls were inducted into the Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame. So, this was a tale of a group that, far from being the greatest, and they weren't the most talented, but they were eye candy. They knew their limits. And for a while, they made a mark. And that mark was rewarded a couple of years ago when they became Hall of Famers. So this is the story of the Mary Jane Girls.